Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jessica. This is my husband,
Anthony.
And today, Anthony is going to show us how he prepares for Resurrection Sunday. So,
take it over. Okay, so how do I prepare? Like I said in the last video that I made, everybody does a little something different. Me, I don't know. I just started doing it. When I started reading and stuff. And one thing as far as this weekend to me is really important. I think it's the most important thing in our faith. It's the good news. It's the gospel itself. All within these 3 days, everything leads up to this in our whole belief system of faith in Jesus Christ and all throughout all Christianity. It's the death, burial, and resurrection of the power of God, the power of the blood, the sacrifice. And so I use these 3 days besides the rest of the year to really set my mind and my spirit apart from everything. I go to work and I go throughout the day, but you'll see right now that no matter what I'm doing, there's always something that I'm meditating on, especially for the next 24 hours, starting on Thursday afternoon, because the Passover starts in the afternoon. So if you read the Gospel of Mark, I like Matthew, but Mark has a lot of detail as far as the events, and Luke also. But the Gospel of Mark chapter 14 and Luke chapter 22, and then of course Matthew starts in chapter 26. So if you read from those chapters on for the rest of that specific book of the gospel, you'll read all of these chain and events. And one thing about the gospels is there's four different people, 4 different points of view of the same action. So let's say 4 people are standing at the corner and there's a car wreck. Through detective style of working, you can come up with the consensus of what happened based on the 4 witness accounts. Not everyone is going to be the same detail. Not everyone is going to have the same reaction. It might be the relationship, it might be the state of mind, it might be the what's going on in that person's life at that time, their awareness to detail. Some people are a little more detailed than others. This is why the Gospels are as closely identified to what we believe is true to the events that happen. So that's why you might get one extra piece in one gospel and you might not see that extra piece in the other gospel that was written, because that particular eyewitness from him was from his point of view. Something as simple as where he was standing in the room and how close he was when things were actually being said one-on-one, especially like the Last Supper. There's one-on-one and they were all at a table, so what was said over there with those guys, we probably wouldn't hear, especially if we're engaged in a conversation. So if you have 4 people writing something in the same room, you're going to have a different point of view. So that's why the Gospels are read the way they're read. That's why it's important to put them together. So you'll hear different scriptures in my outline, because those are the glimpses to have a precise timing on what happened. So I start at the Last Supper. If you want, you can read a little bit before the Last Supper, which is when Jesus is anointed. And the reason why he's anointed is it's a symbolic and it's a significance of the fact that when somebody died back then, they would rub the body down and put perfume on the body because of the stench of a dead body. So the significance of him being perfumed before him actually dying is the fact that he was already in a manner letting them know, like, I'm not gonna die. Like, I'm gonna die, but I'm gonna resurrect. And he resurrected before the time they could actually go and do this to the body. which was Sunday morning, was the intentions of going to the tomb to prepare the body for their customs. So so the Last Supper, you know, most people already know the Last Supper was the last time he did a little bit of teaching. He did a little bit of talking to the disciples and letting them know that this was the new covenant. It was his body and his blood. The bread and the wine represented the body and the blood, which was a new covenant. The old law was being totally fulfilled, and the blood that he was going to shed was the new agreement. And so that was the beginning of going into that. So you go from the Last Supper. After the Last Supper, he goes to pray, and he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. So the one thing to remember is that on Thursday night, leading up to Resurrection Sunday, is that there was the Last Supper, and after the Last Supper, he went to pray. When he went to pray, you'll read in the gospel that at that time he actually told Judas, go ahead and go and do what you agreed to do, because the all-knowing God, because only God knows everything, Jesus knew that he was going to betray him. He knew it, so he said, go and do what you're going to do. So Judas takes off, and he goes and talks to the high priest and the religious leaders and the Sanhedrin to make a deal. So he made a deal for, I don't know, it was like 15 shekels, which is not very much money. So he went to deal for money. So while he took off, after the supper, Jesus and the disciples went to the hills, and he went to pray. You know, so he went and he was in the garden. He set himself apart by going a little bit further than the disciples, and he went in to pray. So he was praying, and this is all happening at night. So then, while he was praying, at some time, an estimation of 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, because the Passover is at sundown. They eat, they talk, they fellowship, then they take off to pray. They're in prayer. We don't know how long they were in prayer. This is just a rough estimate and outline. So they're in the garden praying. Obviously, he's praying for a while, because he checks on the disciples, I believe, 3 times. And every time he went back to talk to check on the disciples, they were all falling asleep, because they knew he told them what was going to happen, but they didn't know it was going to actually happen. They kind of somewhat doubted him. They weren't on alert. They weren't ready for it. So he goes and he prays. So these 3 times, and you know, I could imagine he probably prayed for at least an hour and a half, 2 hours, because I know most people pray for a half hour, and that's kind of like quick. And then this is Jesus, so you know, he prayed for a while. Anyways, so then the Judas and the religious people show up. So when they show up, they arrest Jesus, and they take him to the religious people. The religious people wanted to take out Jesus. They didn't know how, so they always blamed him and tried to kill him based on what he would say. He said he was the Son of God. He was proclaiming that he was God, because it's not blasphemy to say that you're the Son. It's blasphemy to say that you are. That's really important, because if you walk around saying you're related to somebody, that's not a big deal. But when you walk around saying that you are that person, but you're not that person, you're lying. And the last thing you want to do is lie and say that you're God. I think most people nowadays would be like, this dude's crazy. He's saying he's God. That's how they took it. That's why every time he said he was the Son of God, they wanted to stone him. Because in their language and the etymology and the terms of the Son of God going back, when you read the gospel, it's a capital S. When you read everywhere else outside of the gospel, when it's not pertaining to Jesus, it's a small s, which is the importance of the relationship, importance of the identity of the individual, which means that he was proclaiming he was God. There's no other reason to stone him. There's no other reason to put him to death. he was perfectly innocent. He broke no laws. Every time they were trying to accuse him of breaking laws throughout all the Gospels, he would teach them, and he would ask them what law was he breaking, because he wasn't breaking no laws. But they wanted to kill him because he said he was God. And they couldn't believe it, and they couldn't accept it. So they deceived, and they came up with this plan and this plot to kill him based on blasphemy, because he was sinless against the law. So this went on overnight. So from the point of an estimation of 1 o'clock in the morning till 6 in the morning, all this is going on. When they went to capture him, that was already the beginning of the abuse. They had started to hit him. This is going to go longer than what you want.
Okay, well, you can't, because I don't want it cut off.
We'll make part 2.
Okay, next time.
So they, betrayed him. They get him. They're putting him in, overnight, through the night, he goes before the Sanhedrin. And they're questioning him, and you'll find these in the Gospels. They're questioning him, like, who are you? Why are you saying this? And they got to get rid of him because he was getting people to be basically Christians, and they didn't like it because, again, it went against the direction, and they had a relationship with the earthly government, which was the Romans. So if they controlled the religious people, the government controlled the rest of the people, so everybody had peace, everybody was making money, everything was good. But when Jesus came and he got these people to believe in him, he showed them and witnessed the power and proclaimed that he is the Messiah. The religious government didn't like it and had a problem with it. So they were losing control over the religious people. It caused a problem because if the religious people were out of order, the Roman government had to intervene, and they didn't want to have to intervene because they had a certain relationship, which was basically a business relationship. So this is all going on at night in the wee hours of the morning, and they're trying to plot against Jesus to kill him. But they didn't want to kill him themselves, because even to them that would be out of order. They needed to find reason, and they had no reason. So going through the gospel, starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that's in Matthew 27:11 through 14, Jesus goes to his first trial before Pilate. So Jesus goes before Pilate at 6 in the morning. The reason why we know this is because in that particular verse it says in the early morning. The early morning means as soon as the sun rises. That is considered the beginning of the day is considered when the sun actually rises, not at day, not when the light is out before the sun. So that's the first hour. Estimation is 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock he goes before Pilate. Pilate says, I can't find no reason to kill this guy. So he sends him, in Luke 23:6 through 12, you'll read that he sends him to Herod. So he sends him to Herod. Herod says, I can't find nothing wrong. This guy's innocent. There's no reason to kill him. So then by 7 o'clock, he's returned back to Pilate. And at this time, that's when you get the whole thing where people were in this little area and it was free Barabbas or free Jesus. All this is happening at 7 in the morning. So how do I prepare? Just to recap, I start on Thursday night. I read through up until the morning because I'm not going to stay up all night. I read through and I remember that there is a new covenant. That he went to pray, and that he prayed for all believers. He prayed for his disciples, but he prayed for you and me. Jesus himself went to the garden and knew he was betrayed. He knew he was going to die. He knew this, but he continued to do it because there was a reason. And the reason is you and me. He did all this because of us. He did all this because he was perfect. And no man can be perfect. But he did it for us. And he went and he even prayed for us. At that moment, he prayed for us because we were in his thought. He knows everything and everyone. He was alone. If you ever feel alone, just remember that Jesus was alone too. When he went to the garden and he knew he was going to be betrayed, he was alone. He didn't have family. His friends were falling asleep. His followers were falling asleep. They weren't with him. The religious people were plotting against him, and all he was trying to do is show them who he was. So this is how I prepare, as I remember the times and the stages of the events that lead up to resurrection. When I wake up in the morning, if I wake up past 6 o'clock, which on this particular day, I get up early, starting at 6 o'clock, I know that they're already trying. They're already trying to put him to death. They're taking him and trying to find fault on him, but they couldn't. By 7 o'clock in the morning, they have people there, and they're plotting so they can free one or another. So the religious people in the crowd get everybody to want to put Jesus to death because they say that he's the one that's corrupting the religion. They're the ones that he's saying that he's God. He's saying that he's this and he's saying and that, and then it's not right. It's not possible. So they want to put him to death. Between 7 and 8 o'clock, that's when Pilate actually says, okay, we're going to crucify him. Then 8 o'clock, and these are all estimated times, and these estimated times are based on the Gospels. Matthew 27 again says the first hour. At 8 o'clock estimation, Jesus is led to Calvary. Remember, this is 8 o'clock in the morning. He is being led up the mountain. This is when he's being flogged. This is when he's being hit. This is when he's being, taken apart. And if you've never studied it, go in and study it, because at this moment in time in history, it was the worstest way to die. It was the most brutal. It was the most just humiliating way to die. When they whipped him, the closest movie you can ever see is The Passion of Christ. When they whipped him, the nails were in the whip, and then the nails weren't just poking. What they did was they had hooks, and every time they pierced the skin, when it pulled, it literally pulled skin off. It says that his face was unrecognizable. His body was just shredded because there was such a brutal manner. It was the worst way someone can be beat. So then he had to carry the cross, and he carried what the cross does is, and some people say tree, some people say cross. I believe it was a cross. Some people believe it was a tree. The reason why the person died was not because they were hung on a cross or a tree. The reason why they died, and if they didn't die from bleeding, if they didn't die from pain, they died by getting their legs broken. The reason why they would break their legs is because rather you're up here like this or you're like this. When your legs are broken, you can't hold yourself up. So it was asphyxiation. Basically, they were being suffocated. They didn't die from bleeding. They didn't die from pain most of the time. Most of the time, they were up there for hours until their legs got broken and they suffocated to death. So that's why it was torture. So by 8 o'clock, he was led to Calvary. Calvary was the mountain when he walked up the mountain with the cross to be hung on the very thing that was going to kill him.
Part 2.
Okay, we're going to have to go to part 2.
Yeah. We will do part 2.
Right now?
Right now.